joined by Greg Anthony and Channing Frye. We got a lot on tap for you tonight on the CarMax pregame show. We're going to get you ready, of course, for the game that will be on our air, but we will discuss some other things. We're going to start off, though, gentlemen, talking about the Brooklyn Nets, because there's a lot there to unpack as we talk about the Nets. Let's go with the Nets defense. Oh, don't laugh yet,
Shocker.
Greg. We haven't shown anything.
Shocker.
This is their defense the last two games, guys. Of course, against the Cleveland Cavaliers, everyone expected the outcome to be different. I draw your attention to that last line, opponent's paint. 64 in game one against the Cavs, 70 in game two. You guys know it is tough to pull off victories when you're allowing that much scoring in the paint. Defense is something that the Nets know they have to work on. In fact, Nets head coach Steve Nash had this to say about some improvements and adjustments for his team.
We just got to refine the things that we've been doing. You know, we haven't done them well enough. We haven't communicated enough. We haven't made second efforts. At times it feels a little bit like we want a solution rather than a fight. And so we just got to make sure our mentality is strong, and we stick together. We keep pushing to refine those details, like I keep saying, and then we can improve defensively. I don't think there's a magic answer, no matter what scheme you go to, you have to, it has to be five men in concert, defending actions with intelligence and passion.
Okay, so Greg, we're going to start with you because you had a little response before we even saw the defensive graphic for the Brooklyn Nets. What say you about how they can make some improvements? What has to happen?
It'll be a challenge for them. And again, this is not an excuse, but it's a reality because you didn't have a full training camp. You haven't had an opportunity to create habits and establish a culture defensively. And listen, let's be real. It was never the identity of this Nets team to begin with. And so that's going to be an issue for them moving forward. They're going to have to continue to work on it and emphasize it. And one thing I will say, everybody will point to Kyrie, James, and Durant. Those guys are, honestly, they're plus defenders. They're not bad defenders. Their problem is they struggle to control their defensive backboard, and they don't contest shots with as much veracity. And I'm talking about this group collectively. They're relying on a lot of players that really aren't ready for prime time yet. They're going to take some time to adjust. The game's still easy for Durant, Harden, and Kyrie. Those guys on that side of the floor offensively, they're fine. They're playing well. But on the other side, they're going to have stronger leadership and more accountability. And the problem is, with the way the season's laid out, and Channing, you know this, all you can do as Steve Nash is what he just did in that soundbite, is talk about it. You can't practice. You can't push guys. You got Kyrie coming off injuries. You got Durant coming off an Achilles. And so it's going to be hard for them. Their games are going to be practice. They're going to have to establish habits and culture within the games. And in doing that, you're going to have some lumps. You're going to get caught a lot. And remember also, they're going to get everybody's best. It's almost like they're the defending champs right now, because what's the entire NBA world talking about, guys? The Brooklyn Nets.
Yep.
The Lakers are playing tonight. They're the defending champs. With arguably the biggest star of the game, we're not talking about that. We're focusing on the Brooklyn Nets.
Channing, we know that defense is something that is accumulated over a period of time, right? You have to build it up with building blocks. You have to work on your strategies. What is the quick fix for this Nets team?
I think, being on a veteran team and guys that are coming off injuries, for me, it's walkthroughs, right? If you don't want guys to be on their feet, we did a lot of walkthroughs in Cleveland where we would watch film and literally go over what we were supposed to do over and over. It was tedious. I did it in Phoenix when we went to Western Conference Finals. It was tedious, but it created habits, like Jay says. And so for me, it would be keep the ball away from the paint. Like make their power comes from keeping the ball in front of them and not let it getting in the paint. And obviously the Cavs are a different team. They have 6 gigantic big men, right? Like a trio of ogres down there, and Jarrett Allen and Andre Drummond and McGee were having a field day. But for me, it's for them. If they keep people away from the paint and make them settle on jumpers and get out in the fast break, they're almost unstoppable. They have three of the game's best offensive players right now. And if you can get a stop and get out and run, teams cannot compete with you.
I'm glad you brought that up, GA. We were talking about this, right? The offensive power of this Nets team. So we all know there's a defensive deficit. They've even acknowledged that. But the offense is so strong. So what is the potential for this team?
You know, I believe this. I don't know that there's ever been a trio as offensively gifted as this trio. And this is not hyperbole. If you go look at the game historically, there have been some great teams. And typically, you know, you might have those two guys that are A and A minus, right? Mm-hmm. But they've got 3 A's. You know, think about it. Kyrie Irving is supposed to be that third guy. He's averaging 29, 6, and 5. And it's not on volume. 52 from the field, 40, I think, 3 from 3, and 97 from the line. Wow. He's been efficient at scoring it. Durant, efficient at scoring it. Harden's been efficient. So offensively, the one advantage they have is they don't have to be as good defensively as some other teams because their offensive firepower is such that they can make up for some of the deficit. But when you get into the postseason, and we got a long way to go, right. And if they're healthy, the problem, though, is they're going to, as you get deeper, you're going to play better teams. And those teams are going to be able to game plan, and they're going to have a little bit of an effect on the greatness of that trio. And so you've got to be able to offset that with some competence on the defensive side of the floor. And I said this earlier, Durant is a plus defender. Harden was 6th in the league in deflections last year and led the league in steals. He's not a broke defender. Kyrie can defend. It's not his staple, but when his mind is right and if he's being held accountable, he's not a horrible defender, but it's not a part of the DNA of this group. And that's where Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni, and I know it sounds like an oxymoron to mention those two with defense, but that's the reality. They're going to have to figure out a way to make it about that. If I'm them, I'm not even coaching offense. I wouldn't spend any time on their offense because you don't need plays with those 3 guys. You just play random offense, and they're going to be able to consistently score the basketball and create opportunities for everybody. What you got to do is just focus wholeheartedly defensively to get better, not become great, but they've got to be a top 12 defensive team, I think, to really have a legit chance to come out of the East.
Well, it is still early, so we will continue to watch and monitor the Nets' defensive prowess and see if it can grow. In the meantime, though, Kyrie Irving, who is one of the leaders of this team, had this to say on social media. I won't read the whole thing, but basically it starts off, "We will be on that stage, the stage where the, quote, best of the best meet." You know, the main stage. So you can read on from there. He's basically saying either you're with us or you're against us, chanting, "I come to you," because you have played with Kyrie. Are we to read into this, or is this just one of those throwaways that maybe he's just venting?
I mean, you can do what you want, honestly. I think for him, right, I think everyone's going to kind of dissect it. But for me, I look at it like, hey, we got to, as a team, this is a new situation, not for James Harden or KD or Kyrie, but for the guys off that bench. And so, there is a lot of pressure. And like you said, it's like the Lakers are the champions, yet every single night we're talking about the Nets, what they are doing, what they're not doing. Kyrie, since the beginning of the season, next to James Harden, has been the 2 biggest stories of the NBA, which is wild. So for him, I think he's just trying to say to his teammates and everyone that supposedly or doesn't believe in him, it's like, hey, it's a long season. Let's ride it out. But if you're with us, you're with us. But that's not kind of how life works, right? It's our job to dissect every single game, right? We're not dissecting him as a human. We're dissecting the game, and they lost to the worst offensive team in the league, and they put on a show. So give credit to the Cavs. But as media members, we do have to judge just the play. And so, for me, I'd probably say I'd laugh at him and make fun of him. But as a teammate, it's kind of my shtick. So don't read into it and just kind of, okay, let's see what you say tonight. Don't put a tweet out or Instagram thing out and don't get a win the next night, because then you're going to look crazy.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out shortly. what he's going to look
listen,
like.
look, don't put it out there now. Look, you get barbecued. Then we really going to talk about you.
Greg, let's talk a little bit about James Harden. We all know what he can do, right? He's averaged triple-doubles before. The assist, I feel like it's an underrated portion of his game. We always talk about his shooting and his ability to get a bucket at any time. But now that he's with another MVP and another All-Star, how important is his playmaking ability?
I think it's critical to this team because it does give that trio balance. And I've said this before. Listen, James Harden's one of the 5 best passers in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just about, like, people equate your ability to pass with assists. No, it's the angles he can create, the play ahead type of mindset he has, the next step, the vision he has in terms of throwing guys open, creating easy opportunities for guys who aren't as skilled offensively. And I think he's also a